Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Futures in Evidence Dialogue series. These talks with key experts will explore how technology, digitization, and innovation are charting new territory for the monitoring, evaluation, and learning practice. Follow us on Twitter at GI_Global Eval, and we're also on LinkedIn at Global Evaluation Initiative. And visit our webpage. Tell us what you think and enjoy the video.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jessica Meckler from the GEI Launchpad, and today I'm joined by Dugan Fraser, Program Manager of the GEI, who's going to talk to us about the future of monitoring, evaluation, and learning. Thanks for joining us today, Dugan. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Jessica. It's lovely to be with you.
So let's dive into the conversation. Data availability, technology, and digitization are reshaping every aspect of our lives these days. How is this affecting the practice of MEL?
So I think the first thing to really bear in mind is the way that those forces that you've mentioned are not present everywhere. And so one of the major dynamics is the increased experience of exclusion. And that in many instances, people are really being left behind as a consequence of the pandemic. And in many instances, and particularly for women and young people, their exclusion from the mainstream has been intensified. And so that's the one thing, is to really bear in mind the way we have absolutely relied profoundly on the digital dimension is not something that a lot of people have access to. And so this divergence, and it's a theme I'm going to come back to in this conversation, this divergence has been accelerated, it's been intensified, and it's something we really need to think about when we talk about monitoring, evaluation, and learning. And a very, very intentional element of our practice has to be about pulling people in from the margins, about constantly asking ourselves who's being left out, who can't participate in this. That's just the first point. The second point is that what's happened in the most amazing way is that what used to be quite a ponderous and slow process of generating evidence and having a deliberation and thinking about what it meant and trying to work out how to respond, what your policy options are, has become much accelerated. Things have gotten much faster. You know, when you are looking at epidemiological data and trying to make a decision about whether to allow people to land in your airport tomorrow, you've got to move much more quickly than you ever used to. And I mean, in the place where I'm from, which is South Africa, people have had to really respond in ways that have been very demanding, very taxing. And I think it's really shown in many instances the challenges that institutions have in authentically using data, evidence to make decisions. And so, one of the other things that's happened is that we've had to start using existing data. You know, you can't always customize data in the way that you used to. Previously, if you wanted to do an evaluation, you could slowly plan out a questionnaire and do a survey and run a number of key informant interviews. Now, when we're operating remotely in the way that we do, those things are hard. And in many instances, they don't necessarily generate the best kinds of insights. So we're finding people are using existing administrative data in ways that they previously were not so keen on, and discovering in many instances that that is in fact an amazing treasure trove, and it's very, very exciting. I think the thing that's most evident is the speed at which all of this happens. You know, we've come into a place where we knew we were going to be surfing on the edge of a wave of intense experience as a result of what we knew were going to be some very savage forces. We knew that the climate crisis was going to be very fast. We knew that there was a threat of a pandemic. And so what's happening is these things are moving really quickly. And so for monitoring, evaluation, and learning, we're discovering that we have to be so much more nimble, so much more agile. And some of the distinctions, for example, between monitoring, which was always understood to be a periodic managerial activity, and evaluation, which was always thought of as more occasional, more strategic, the boundary between those things is really blurring. And the focus has to become much more on learning, like really in an authentic way. What are we actually learning? And in many ways, what's also become a very important element is the fact that we need to be clear on what the question is that we're answering. We can't just be saying we're learning so many amazing things. We've got to understand what is the question that we are answering because there is so much data, there's so much evidence. And I think one of the things that strikes me constantly is the incredible disparity between the ability of the private sector and government institutions to generate, use, and make meaning of data. Imagine if governments could harvest data and make decisions based on it in the same way that the big social media giants are selling our data in order to sell us stuff. Why is it that those institutions operate so differently? And how do we bring the good elements of those practices into the public space? How do we start to behave with a respectful, privacy respecting, empowering approach to data? These things are really major forces, and they mean that monitoring, evaluation, and learning have got to really get their game on. It's an exciting time to be working in this field, and it's a fascinating time to be working in the building and strengthening of systems, which is what the Global Evaluation Initiative does.
You mentioned how the pandemic has led to a lot of these shifts and changed a lot of how we do things. And I think what would be great to dive into is, in addition to this landscape that you gave us, what are some of the opportunities that might exist for the MEL community? What are some of the challenges in actually grappling with some of these really tough, overarching questions? And do you think our community is ready to handle these?
So I don't think that our community is particularly ready. And I think that it's not because we don't have the technological capacity or the technical skills. I think we've still not really managed to make the transition into where we need to be if we're going to truly and authentically respond to the next 20 years. We know that inequality in a way that was not apparent 2 or 3 years ago is operating at an incredible pace. And the problem about inequality is the effect it has on social stability. When people feel excluded, they get angry and they behave in weird ways and they disrupt and they are very difficult to collaborate with. So, when we were thinking about a society that is wanting to change the lives of ordinary people and help the people that we care about the most, vulnerable people, people living in poverty, how do we build a sense that we are sharing a common vision and a common destiny? Monitoring, evaluation, and learning have got some real additions. We can really add some value in that. But it has to be done much more thoughtfully. We need to be thinking about how we use, I don't know, you're going to laugh at me, but how do we use TikTok to give people space to be able to tell their stories and not just tell their stories as anecdotes, but tell their stories in ways that are meaningful and that are going to really add up and stack up into policymaking evidence. So I think for me, to answer your question, we're not ready, but we could be. And I think we
Mhm.
could be doing much more. Because I think the thing that is so exciting is that in many ways, the challenges are institutional and political. They're not technical. We could do a much better job of using the capacities that we have if we put our minds to it. And that, I think, is something that an initiative like the GEI can really get behind.
What do you think the characteristics of MEL are going to look like in the coming years? And how can entrepreneurs engage in this and really bring value to building systems at the country level?
I think what's really interesting is to reflect on the experience of the tech sector over the last 15 years. and to think to ourselves, what happened there? How did these entities become so wildly successful? What was the recipe that allowed them to innovate and to test the functionality of what they were proposing? And what was the support ecosystem that made that kind of intervention thrive? And I think we in the MEL space need to be thinking much more systematically about how we build the environment in which exciting, dynamic, inclusive, empowering MEL can take place. And one of the elements in that is this idea of supporting innovation, is the idea of literally running a little hothouse where people are able to try some stuff and get some support. Often people want financing, which is definitely important, but people also really often just need either advice or feedback. Somebody who's done something exciting and interesting before, who can talk to them about what's going on and what their experience looked like and how else you might try to do this thing. And I think that is what the Launchpad is trying to offer. We are really trying to think to ourselves, what's it going to take to nurture and grow and germinate some exciting enterprises that bring with it that startup dynamic, that bring with it an innovative and entrepreneurial view, but which is intended to have strong social outcomes. And it's an exciting way of thinking about this space. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how our community responds. I think I've heard a number of different terms used: the social economy, the caring economy. Those spaces, I think, are definitely open to this. And if we can combine the best of many threads, I think we'll be in a good space.
So thanks so much for joining us. For everyone watching, we hope you enjoyed this conversation, and please check out the other videos of this series.